This lesson is going to be about the strategies and skills that you can learn and use for the true, false, not given questions of the IELTS reading section. Over the past few months, many of our clients and our viewers have asked us to put together a video that focuses specifically on this question because many students have difficulty getting the scores that they want for these true, false, not given, or also known as yes, no, not given types of questions. The yes, no, not given and the true, false, not given questions are basically the same types of questions, and the same kind of strategies and skills will apply. So this lesson will focus on just this type of question, and the reading example and the material that we will use is of course coming from our website. So to find these types of reading passages and exercises, again, just visit us there, join the full course, or check out our practice tests and so on. All right, so this is true, false, not given, or yes, no, not given strategies. The very first point that you need to keep in mind, and this is actually where most students make their very first big mistake, is with this type of question, you must not read the questions before you read the passage. So many students learn from schools, from other students, from teachers, that you should just read the questions before you read the passage, and then skim and scan for the answers. Again, as we emphasized in many of our previous videos for the reading section of IELTS, if you want to get a score over 6 or 6.5, especially if you want to get into 7, 7.5, there's just no way to do this by skimming and scanning for answers. Again, remember, the examiners and the people who create these IELTS exams, so the test designers, they make the test so that it's basically impossible or close to impossible to get a really good score by just skimming and scanning. If you've heard of somebody getting a high score this way, it's most likely just luck. And of course, you can't be going into the IELTS exam hoping for luck to be on your side. You need to have the right skills. So again, remember, skimming and scanning for the reading section does not work if you want to get scores over 6. If you want to get a score of 5 or less, yeah, it might be okay, but we do not suggest this type of strategy. As we explained in some of the previous lessons, there are some types of questions that you can look at before reading the passage, and there are some types of questions that you must not look at before you read the passage. The easiest way to understand this is it's okay to read questions where all of the information is somewhere in the passage. So it's basically paraphrased in the passage, but all of it is there. A good example of this is complete the summary. So complete the summary question, all of the information in the summary, except the blanks, of course, are somewhere in the passage. So that type of question is okay to quickly read or scan before you read the passage. However, and this is where it's really important for these true, false, not given questions, any type of question in the reading section that contains information which is not in the passage, you should never read this type of question before you read the passage. The simple argument here is logic. If you read a question with false information or not given information, as is very true in this example here, then it will confuse you. And when you actually try to answer the question, then your mind will not be able to distinguish or separate whether the information was actually in the passage or if it's something that you're remembering from skimming or scanning the question before you read the passage. So again, the number one and most important step here with these true, false, not given questions when you're practicing at home or during the exam is do not read these before you read the passage. So do not read before the passage because it will be confusing. Okay, so make sure that you wait to look at the question until you've finished reading the passage. It will be much more logical and much more likely that you will get a good score when you do it this way. All right. The second strategy that we're going to look at is using logic for answering these questions. So you shouldn't be scanning and skimming for the answers for these yes, no, not given questions for the most part. So let's say you have 5 or 6 yes, no, not given questions. You should be able to answer 3 or 4 of these questions from the 6 without having to look at the passage. If you're looking at the passage for each question or each statement to see if it's true or false or not given, number one, you're using way too much time. And number two, you will likely become very frustrated and you probably won't be answering some of them correctly. So again, you should be using other techniques to answer these questions. You shouldn't be searching for each answer, okay? So use logic to help answer these questions. So again, we will look at this in a little bit more detail later on in the lesson, but for now, just remember that you will need to use some logic. Okay, number 3 is use visualization and paraphrasing. So, as I've mentioned in previous lessons, visualizing information that you read is a very important part of good reading comprehension and doing well on the IELTS reading section. And of course, paraphrasing is a key way to do well on the exam, and it's the key tool that the test makers use to assess your level of English in all sections of the IELTS, and of course it's true here. So you're going to see that a lot of the true, false, not given questions are paraphrases. It's very rare that they actually state the question or the statement close to or the same as what you see in the text. So most of the answers that you're going to see will be some form of a paraphrase. So again, that will be very important. All right, so before we go into more details and before we look at the questions, again, as very importantly for point number 1 here, the first step is to actually look at the passage and read the passage, and only after look at the questions. So let's take a look at the reading passage now that we're going to use as the example, which is seismic shifts, silent drifts, again coming from our website at www.aehelp.com. So let's go ahead and read this passage, and then we'll look at the true, false, not given questions and apply some of these strategies in more detail.
Continental drift and plate tectonics. When looking at a map of the world, it is natural to notice that Africa and South America seem to be able to fit together, as if they are two parts of a former whole. It was this insight which led Flemish cartographer Abraham Ortelius in 1596 to put forward for the first time the idea that at one period the continents were in different places than they are today. It would take over 300 years for the theory to be fully developed, and 50 years after that for the mechanism of the phenomena to be discovered. It was not until 1915 that German geologist Alfred Wegener proposed the Continental Drift theory, which states that the Earth's crust is made up of many sections that float slowly over the molten mantle and core of the Earth. Wegener argued that in the past the continents were all stuck together. He called this supercontinent Pangaea, which is Greek for all Earth. Wegener hypothesized that approximately 200 million years ago this supercontinent began to break up, and the pieces began to move away from each other. Initially, Pangaea divided into two parts, named Laurasia and Gondwana. Laurasia consisted of what is today North America, Asia and Europe, whilst Gondwana comprised modern-day South America, Africa and Australia. These supercontinents eventually split apart further, resulting in today's continental configuration. It is interesting to note that today's continental alignment is just that. Millions of years in the future, the Earth's continents will appear very different. Given enough time, it is possible that the Earth's land masses will return to a Pangaea-like unified state. The evidence for continental drift is plentiful. The most common evidence is the discovery of the same type of dinosaurs in extremely different locations. The same type of dinosaur fossil will be found in northeastern parts of South America as well as northwestern parts of Africa. The logical explanation for phenomena such as this is that at one time these parts of the world were not only connected but adjacent. The evidence for continental drift was discovered long before an explanation for it was found. It was during the 1960s that the theory of plate tectonics was developed. This new theory explained fully the nature of the Earth's crust, that it was broken up into many pieces that tended to smack into each other and pull apart from each other. In extreme cases, such as the Indian subcontinent, a plate's movement can be so severe that it causes massive mountains to be formed when the plates hit another. This is precisely what has happened over the past millions of years, when the Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian plate, in the process creating the Himalayas, which include the tallest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest. Plate tectonics are not only responsible for mountains and the movement of the continents, they are also responsible for volcanoes. Volcanoes usually result from one of the two plate configurations. They form in places where the plates are colliding, or where the plates are pulling apart. In the first case, the plates come together pushing against each other, causing friction and heat, which allows some of the crust material to melt, resulting in liquid magma. Because magma is less dense than the surrounding rock, it ends up rising to the surface, where it becomes a volcano. An example of this type of volcano is the famous Mount Vesuvius, which destroyed the city of Pompeii in 79 CE. The second type of volcano comes from divergent plates. These types tend to be underwater, as in the mid-oceanic ridges. Volcanic islands such as Iceland and Hawaii were formed by underwater volcanic activity, eventually spewing off enough matter to form land above the water. Of course, there is one final important result of plate tectonics: earthquakes. Earthquakes are perhaps the most terrifying of all natural disasters. They are practically invisible. They happen below the Earth's surface and have devastating results. Earthquakes happen along fault lines, places where two plates are colliding, diverging, or slipping past each other. In the case where the two plates are attempting to slip past each other, the most devastating earthquakes can occur. This is because friction does not allow the plates to pass each other until sufficient energy to counteract the resistance has been built up. So the two plates rub against each other for centuries or millennia until one day they finally slip. This slip is what results in a sudden catastrophic earthquake. If this slip occurs in the ocean, underneath the Earth's surface, it can cause a massive tidal wave known as a tsunami. If this slip occurs directly beneath a major city, Massive destruction will result. There are many such cities at risk of these earthquakes, many of them along what is known as the Ring of Fire, surrounding the Pacific Ocean. These cities include Tokyo, San Francisco, Vancouver, and Santiago. Understanding plate tectonics reveals that it is not a question of if these major cities will get hit by an earthquake, it is only a question of when.
All right, now we've read the passage, and hopefully you've understood the passage mostly. Again, in order to get a fairly good score on the IELTS reading section, you need to understand at least 60%, but closer to 70% of what you're actually reading. Again, to improve your reading comprehension, there are lots of skills that you can use. One of the really important ones, which we've discussed before, is visualization. And this passage in particular, as are some of the passages in the IELTS, is a very visual passage. So this passage was about seismic activity and continental drift theory, which basically means the way that the continents like North America, Asia, Africa, South America, Antarctica, and so on, the way that they move around on the surface of our planet over millions and millions of years. So hopefully, as you read this passage, you took some time, maybe even closed your eyes, to try to visualize and see the information that you are reading in your mind's eye. This is going to help you to answer these true, false, not given questions. And of course, it's going to help you with other questions as well. So the first strategy for true, false, not given questions is use of logic. So what I mean here is if you use logical, critical thinking well, then you should be able to solve a lot of these true, false, not given questions quickly and easily. And I'll show you an example of that. To understand this, you need to know that the people who are making the IELTS exams, they're very intelligent people, and they specialize in creating tests that are accurate in measuring people's abilities, in this case for English. The information that you see in the IELTS exam is true. So they use real science and, to the best of their knowledge, true information in the world. So they don't make up imaginary information. They're not going to tell you false information. So the information that you read here about continental drift theory is the most current belief in the way that continental drift works, and it's accurate. And of course, the writers of these passages, they're very, very good authors, and they know exactly how essays should be written and how passages should be written. So the passages will always have very good structure. They will always have related and connected information. So as long as you're able to use good logic, these passages should be easy to follow and should be clear in their structure and in their information. Okay. Also, the information that's used for passages tends to be general information to the world. So the IELTS people know that these exams are taken in many, many countries around the world. So they make sure that the information that they use for these passages are not gender biased, are not culturally biased, are not religiously biased. So the type of information that you will read is the type of information that you likely learn at some point in your elementary, middle, or high school years, which is probably taught to most students around the world. So if you think back to some of your learning, you will probably recognize that this information is already familiar. It's very good if you can use your past knowledge to help you answer these questions, because again, As long as your knowledge is accurate, it will match with the knowledge used by the IELTS people. So use of logic, here's an excellent way to approach it. So when you're looking at these questions, you should ask yourself a couple of questions to help you answer quickly and accurately. The first question that you should ask yourself about the true, false, not given question is this information important for the topic and main idea or controlling idea? This question is important here because if the statement of the true, false, not given is not important for the topic or not important for the controlling idea, it doesn't matter if it's true, it doesn't matter if it's false, it's going to be not given. It's very unlikely that an author will include information that's not connected to the topic or the controlling idea of the passage. In our example, if the true or false not given question is not connected to this idea of seismic activity and continental drift theory, then it's probably not included. Again, remember, a passage is about 600-700 words long, so it's not a lot of information. So the author will only include explanations and ideas and details that are strongly and closely connected to the main topic and the controlling idea. So if you do not think that it's important for the controlling idea and the topic, simply answer not given, because probably the author didn't think it was important either, and they didn't include it in the text. So you don't want to search for this because you will not find it. You will read the whole passage over again to realize that it's not given. It's way too much time. So again, ask yourself, is this information important for the topic and the main idea? If it's not important for the topic, then the answer will likely be not given. So if your answer is no as it's not important, then the likely answer will be not given in most cases, okay? So don't keep thinking about it, don't scan the whole passage again, just simply say, okay, I don't think this statement has anything to do with this topic or main idea, or it's way too small of a detail, or it's a strange example, then it's going to be not given. Now, if the answer is yes, so yes, this statement or this question is important for the topic. So you read the statement, you read the question, and it's important for the topic, then the answer will be either true or false, or of course yes or no. So if you read the statement and you think, okay, this is going to be something that's kind of important for this topic, then definitely the author thinks it's important for the topic and it's likely something that they discuss. So in this case, it's going to be true or false. So if your answer is yes, this information is important for the topic, then you need to ask yourself a second question. The second question is this true or false? So ask yourself, and this is of course where your logic should come into play. So if you're familiar with the information, if you remember learning it before, and these usually aren't too difficult types of questions, then you need to ask yourself, okay, it's important for the topic, so I answered yes, so is it true or false? If you realize it's true, then the answer will likely be true. If you think it's false, then of course the answer will be false. So then you just need to answer true or false. So answer is going to be true or false. Now, if your answer for the first question is yes, the information is important for this topic and controlling idea, and for your second question, is this true or false, your answer is I don't know. I don't know if it's true or false. That's when you might need to skim or scan or try to find that answer, okay? So only in that situation, spend the extra time to look at some of the keywords and to search for those keywords or their synonyms or antonym negatives in the passage. Otherwise, believe in yourself, answer which one you think, and then move on. All right, let's have a look at some of the questions from the passage that we just read, and then we can apply this strategy and you can see how this works well. So, question number 20. It took over 350 years for the theory and mechanism of continental drift to be fully developed. All right, so in this question, we're going to ask, number one, is it important for us to know when the theory of continental drift began? The answer here should be yes. And the reason it should be yes is because when we're talking about a scientific theory, who, when, and where the theory was discovered or where somebody came up with it, that's definitely a main part of the idea of this information. So it's definitely going to be very, very important. Now, is it true or is it false then that this theory took over 350 years to develop? Well, I don't remember this perfectly, but I do remember that somewhere in the beginning of the passage, I saw that the theory of continental drift was discovered by someone a long, long time ago, a Dutch cartographer. I pictured this map maker who was wearing very, very old-fashioned clothes, and he was already thinking of this theory. So I can kind of go back and look for this, and sure enough, in the first paragraph, I can see that it says, it would take over 300 years for the theory to be fully developed, and 50 years after that for the mechanism of the phenomenon to be discovered. So here, notice it's a little bit tricky. It says 300 years and then another 50 years. So in this question, I even need to use a little bit of simple math and add together the 300 and 300 and the 50, and I get 350. So indeed, the answer for number 20 here is true. It took over 350 years for the theory and mechanism of continental drift to be fully developed. So again, I use this technique. I pay attention to the tricky nature of the question. Sometimes you need to do this little bit of math when they're using years or numbers. And then I can get the correct answer. Okay, let's have a look at the second one. 21. The Earth's crusty shell is made up of plates which float slowly across the ocean. All right, so again, I ask myself the question, is this information important for the topic to know how the plates on the Earth's surface move or how they work? Yes, absolutely. That's what this passage is about continental drift. So it's really just another way of saying that. So definitely this statement is important for this topic. So the answer will be either true or false. So again, the Earth's crusty shell is made up of plates which float slowly across the ocean. Well, I know from my school years that the plates on the surface of the Earth are actually quite thick, and the ocean is on top of these plates. So the plates themselves contain the oceans. So it's not the plates that are on top of the ocean, but rather the ocean that's on top of the plates. So I know very quickly and very easily that the answer here is going to be false. So I don't need to search for this. I don't need to scam. I'm very confident that the answer is going to be false. It's important for the topic, and this information is not true. So it's going to be false. All right, number 22. There is significant evidence that India was once attached to Antarctica. All right, so here I asked the question, is this information important for the topic and the main idea? So now here's where I need to use some good, solid logic. It says that India was once attached to Antarctica. And this is definitely an example, so it's a piece of detail. Now, this piece of detail is suspicious, simply because I need to ask here, why would the author specifically discuss where India was attached? It might be important, but I don't remember reading too much about which continent was attached to which other continent, or which land piece was attached to which other land piece. So I don't think the author used this type of example. I didn't visualize it. And so in this case, I'm going to say no, this information was not important for this topic of continental drift, simply because it's too much detail and it's too unique of an example. I do remember reading about India, but nothing about where it was attached. So I'm going to simply just say not given and move on. Okay? Don't rethink your answers. It's very important. Number 23. Mount Everest is a result of a collision between the Eurasian and Himalayan plates. All right, so again, is it important for the topic how Mount Everest is created? Yes, I believe so, simply because the Himalayas and mountain ranges are a very good example to support the idea of continental drift theory, because that's basically where the two plates are smashing and then creating this mountain range. And the best example of this, of course, is the tallest or highest mountain range in the world, which are the Himalayas. The Himalayas, however, are a mountain range, not a continental plate. It would be very strange to name an entire continental plate after the name of a mountain range. So here, if I ask, is this information important for the topic? I would say yes, it's a very good example to support continental drift. Is it true then, or is it false? I would say it's false, simply because I don't think that a continental plate is named after the same thing as a mountain range. It would be like naming an ocean after a city. It's kind of a strange idea. So I think it's going to be false here. So my answer here will be false. All right, so that's how you use this type of logical approach to true, false, not given questions. Again, it looks simple, but definitely it requires a lot of practice before the exam so that you can do this quickly and efficiently. Okay, now that we've looked at the use of logic, let's have a look at our second strategy. Continuing on with strategies for the true, false, not given questions, there's a couple of points that you need to remember about the IELTS exam and the way that these questions are created. So the IELTS exam is a progressive test, which means that it becomes more and more difficult within each section the later you are. So it means that question number 1 will be the easier question, and then 2 will be more difficult, 5 will be even more difficult, 10 will be even more difficult, and so on. In the reading section, passage 1, generally speaking, will be the easier passage, then passage 2 will be more difficult, and finally passage 3 will be the most difficult. Sometimes students say that they find the second or third passage easier. This is usually because they're more familiar with the topic from their own experience. But generally speaking, the passages do increase in difficulty. Now, This is also true for questions. So within each question set, usually the first question is the easier question, and then the second question is more difficult, third question is more difficult. So this is important to remember for the true, false, not given, because the first true, false, not given question that you're looking at will usually be the easiest question. So that means that if you want to spend some time to make sure that you got an answer correct, you should spend time on the first 2, 3 true, false, not given questions, and don't worry too much about the last 1 or 2 true, false, not given questions. I mean, do your best, give an answer, and then move on to the next questions. This is because in many cases, the last 1 or 2 true, false, not given questions, they're testing for level 7, 8, or even 9 IELTS proficiency. Make sure you get the first few true, false, not given questions correct. Okay, and again, do your best for questions 5, 6, or even 7, but don't spend too much time there. Also, the other point that you need to remember about the way that the questions are made in the reading section is they're synchronous with the passage. So what I mean is that question 1 will be somewhere near the beginning of the passage for the answer. Question 2 will be in maybe paragraph 2 or later. 3 will be in the third, and so on. And then the answers for true, false, not given question 4, 5, or 6 will be somewhere in the last couple paragraphs. Often for the last true, false, not given question, or the last 2, you need to understand more than one of the last paragraphs to get them correct. This is why I said that those ones test a higher level of English, so you shouldn't waste too much time trying to figure those out or get confused or get disappointed. Just do your best and move on. It's the first few that you must make sure you get correctly. So again, remember with the questions that the questions follow with the passage. And again, this means that the first true, false, not given will be earlier, the last one will be near the end. All right, so this is what you need to know about the questions to use your time more efficiently and also to control your thinking and your confidence a little bit better. All right, now that you know this, the other 2 points to really pay attention to are visualization and paraphrasing. So with visualization, as I've mentioned in several of the previous lessons, humans are primarily visual beings. This means that we experience most of our world through our eyes. This is very important when we're reading text for good comprehension. You need to be able to see what you read. This is true whether you're reading in your own language or whether you're reading in English or another language. You must try to picture or imagine what you're reading. If your visualization is the same in the true, false, not given as what you visualized when you read the passage, it's very likely that the answer is true and it was given because you saw it when you read the passage and then you saw it when you read the question. So you don't need to think too hard. You saw it in both cases, the same idea, the same picture. It should be true. If you saw the opposite, then it's probably false. If you visualize when you read the question and you think, I didn't see anything like that when I was reading the passage in my mind, then it's going to be not given. So for visualization, you should think about it like, did I see this in the passage? If your answer is yes, then it's probably going to be true, okay? If your answer is, I saw the opposite, then likely your answer is going to be false. If your answer is going to be, I didn't see anything like that, then your answer should be not given, okay? Now, again, remember that this type of strategy will only work if you read the passage first and then read the questions after. This is, again, another reminder here for why you must not read true, false, not given questions before you read the passage, because then this strategy will not work. Your brain will be confused and it will not remember if it saw the information when reading the questions or when reading the passage. This is only effective if you follow that first rule. Do not read true, false, not given questions before the passage. All right, if we look at our example, we can go through it very quickly and simply with this strategy. So it took over 350 years for the theory and mechanism of continental drift to be fully developed. Indeed, I saw while reading the passage somebody developing this theory and then it taking it another 300 years and another 50 years for this to happen. So I visualized that passage of time. I saw the change in history and almost into modern time before we really got to this. So that helps me to gain confidence in the answer that it's true. The Earth's crusty shell is made up of plates which float slowly across the ocean. This is 21. When I visualize this, so when I close my eyes and I see these big plates floating like boats on the ocean, it's a strange visualization for me. It's too imaginary, it's too cartoony. I don't think our planet works that way. So this is where I know that there's a mismatch. I saw maybe not the opposite, but something quite different when I was reading the passage. So I don't think this will be a true answer. Therefore, again, gives me confidence that it's false. There's significant evidence that India was once attached to Antarctica. I didn't see anything like that when I visualized this passage of India being attached somewhere else. So, especially to Antarctica, which is of course all covered with ice, and India is a very warm place. So I didn't visualize this very warm Indian subcontinent landmass being attached to this icy piece. So it's just not going to be there. So it's not given. Mount Everest is a result of a collision between Eurasian and Himalayan plates. I definitely visualized Mount Everest being formed when I read the passage. But here I didn't really see it as a Himalayan plate. I saw Himalayan mountains. So there's a little bit of a mismatch here. Again, that helps me to get the answer that it's false. So very powerful tool for solving true, false, or yes, no, not given questions. Again, make sure to practice this one at home. All right, now the final strategy here for true, false, not given, which is of course paraphrasing. So let's have a look at that. So last but not least is paraphrasing for true, false, not given. Of course, as you know from previous lessons now, paraphrasing is one of the primary tools or main tools used by the test makers to assess your level of English proficiency. just a quick review from previous paraphrasing lessons, that there are a couple of main ways that we can paraphrase language within the IELTS test. So one, of course, is using synonyms. So different words that share the same meanings, like go and leave. Another way to paraphrase is antonym plus negative. Of course, two negatives make a positive. So we can do the same in some language situations, like stay, don't go. So this is an antonym with a negative paraphrasing. Then, of course, we have grammar. A simple example is passive and active voice. So I'm driven to school by my mom. This is passive. My mom drives me to school. This is active form. So this is a type of grammar paraphrasing. There's lots of other types, but that's one, or lots of other examples, but that's one example. And then, of course, there's also expressions. Expressions include idioms, phrasal verbs, and so on, just to be on the same page, which means to share the same idea or to have the same idea is a good example. And then a fifth way is descriptive. So descriptive paraphrasing is basically paraphrasing something by describing it. So it's delicious, it's red, it's round, it's an apple. So this is a descriptive type of paraphrasing. Now, IELTS examiners use all of these different types of paraphrasings to test your knowledge. When you practice these, when you can recognize these, for sure you're going to improve your score. And this is very true for the yes, no, not given, or true, false, not given types of questions. So when we look at the questions, then we can see that the first question is paraphrased in paragraph A. It says, it would take over 300 years for the theory to be fully developed, and 50 years after that for the mechanism of the phenomenon to be discovered. So this is a type of descriptive paraphrasing where you see that the answer is true from two phrases which describe the answer. And then for the next question, so question number 21, in paragraph B, we can see that's where the answer is coming from. The Earth's crust is made up of many sections that float over the molten mantle and core of the Earth. So here we can see that the answer is false, and we can see some synonyms like sections instead of plates. When you recognize this, you can get the correct answer there. Again, notice how the answers are coming in sequence. So answer for question 20 from first paragraph, answer for question 21 from the second paragraph. And then for question 22, you're likely not going to find this paraphrasing because the answer is not given. So again, this is where you just need to rely more on your logic and more on your visualization. And then question 24, again, we can see some paraphrasing. So the answer is coming from paragraph E at the end. We can see the Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian plate, in the process creating the Himalayas, which include the tallest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest. So here we can see that there is some synonym paraphrasing, but we can also see that there's nothing here paraphrasing this Himalayan continent. So again, you can get that when you pay attention to the details. And you can see, of course, collision, colliding, some grammar paraphrasing there. Okay, so practice these skills. Make sure you pay attention to the way that the questions are created. Visualizing the information is absolutely important. And then, of course, practice the first strategy that we looked at, which is using your logic and figuring out whether information is important for the topic or not, and whether or not that information may be true. When you practice these skills with several different examples, for sure your confidence will improve for this type of question, and for sure you will begin to see that you're getting more and more of them correct.